Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you are watching this. Welcome back to the final podcast of season 23-24 for the Since I Was Young podcast for all things Heart of Midlothian. Joining you today is myself, Ewan Ramsey, and my co-host Alan, and our very special guest and friend of the podcast, John McKellar. John, how are you doing, my friend? You well?
I'm wonderful, man. Yeah, I'm doing well. How you doing, Ewan?
Oh.
Every time I've been through Edinburgh in the last year, you have been avoiding me, it feels like.
But it seems to be every time I do avoid you guys, we always come away with a win. So they may as well to keep that going. So
That is very true, actually. We're doing pretty well when Ewan's not around, unfortunately.
there you go for all in life as well, mate. It carries on. Alan, how you doing, my man? You well as well?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. As ever, I was on a night shift last night, so running off very little sleep at the moment, but we crack on regardless.
Some things just never change. Well, thank you very much for us. Thank you very much for you all joining us. Every time you're watching this, as always, we are on our third season review involving the podcast. Obviously, it's been a bit of a topsy-turvy year for 23-24 season, but I think we can probably all agree it has been a rather successful one. So we're going to dive into the high points throughout the season. Obviously, we're going to, Alan is going to try and remind me what our pre-season sort of thoughts were before the season started. We're going to look a wee bit into our coach, Steven Naismith, and in particular what he's achieved throughout the year. Some of our season highlights as well. Have a wee look into the squad as well, see that what parts of it needs to be improved, what parts do we feel like we need to improve in terms of recruitment as well, some ins and outs, etc. So we'll dive a wee bit into that as well. Our personal player awards as well. So we'll try to make that a triangling free part of the pod as well. And I'll look ahead into the new season of 24-25 and a wee quiz to end our review. So we do hope you guys enjoy it as ever. And just before we get cracked on, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast via our YouTube page, please think about subscribing. I'd like to promise, I think I've made this promise every single year, Alan. I'd like to say that by the time the new season comes, we will be on Spotify as well, but do not hold your breath. If you want to subscribe via the YouTube, please do. And if you want to check us out on our socials as well, they will be on screen and in the description. So please feel free to check those out. And once again, we do hope you enjoy. So guys, season 23-24. As I said at the start, Alan, you can probably remind me, but I think I remember when we were going through last year's season review. I think the three of us kind of shared the same kind of, expectations and thought process when we actually hired Steven Naismith to be our head coach. I believe it did actually happen on the day that we did record our season review as well, which was actually quite handy to actually discuss as well. So I believe we were all on the same thought of we're a bit kind of okay, this could go either quite well or really, really, really shit quickly. So I'll start with you, John. Obviously, when we started the season, it was a bit of a kind of hearts were in a bit of no man's land. Let's say, we didn't really have an identity of how we wanted to play. Yeah, Naismith came out and said we want to play free flowing attacking football. We want to be more braver against the old firm, etc. Quite high expectations from the man himself, but just in general throughout that first few months when we did have that slippy start, what were your thoughts kind of going on and cracking into the rest of the season?
Yes, like you say, I think Naismith alongside Forrest and McAvoy were kind of announced as the management team about literally, I think, 10 minutes before we went live with last year's end of season review. It was mental, the timing of it. Um, I feel like throughout pre-season, I very much got the sense that there were too many cooks in the kitchen, and it felt as if there wasn't a clear directive in terms of what they were looking for. When you looked at their interviews in pre-season, while they were over in Spain, it felt like the three of them were saying different things, and that was while they were all kind of also claiming, "Oh, we're all on the same page about these things, so we're going to be very clear and concise in our message." But all of them were saying different things. And you even had Frankie McAvoy saying outright, like, Naismith is going to manage this team moving forward. We all kind of knew that the whole technical director thing was a load of faff, really, until he got his gold star stickers from UEFA finished. So throughout the first few months, particularly the first several weeks of the season, it looked almost akin to Hearts under Robbie Nielsen toward the end, where the players didn't seem to have a clue. And while under Nielsen, I feel that the issue was the players' mentality and that they chucked it. Under the three-man team in the first couple of months of the season, it was very much the lack of a clear direction. I think that was proven when Naismith took over permanently as manager. We saw an almost immediate upturn in form. I think we drew the derby, then got gubbed off both Celtic and Rangers, but then we went on an absolutely spectacular run where I think we ended up with, was it 28 points out of 30 before we got destroyed by Rangers? Like, it was an absolutely insane run over kind of, when would that have started? Like late September all the way through
I think it
until
was
February. We were just
September, yeah.
we were practically blowing away everything in our path for the better part of, what's that, like 4 or 5 months, which I think is key to how we ended up finishing where we did, which we'll get into in a bit. But in terms of the first couple of months of the season, it was frustrating to watch, particularly I think so for me, because I think I was the loudest voice at the table last year saying Naismith is going to be brilliant and very much cheering on that structure. But I remember saying to Alan early on, like, I don't know if I'm going to be proven wrong here. As it is at the moment, it's just not working. I still had faith in Naismith as a head coach, but I certainly didn't have faith in Frankie McAvoy, and I wasn't fond of the three-man team aspect. It should have just been a case of Naismith will be manager, because he can't do UEFA games. Like, he won't be in the dugout for those. It should have been that straightforward. I don't know why they felt the need to go through the whole technical director and the three-man team thing. It doesn't work. It's not going to work at a team of Hearts level. You know, we're not some team that has a mega complex full of these analysts and massage tables that have different angles to them depending on the player. It's too complicated. I think it was overcomplicated, and that ended up having an effect on the play the first couple of months of the season.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of compliment that as well, like before I pass it to yourself, Alan. I spoke to Corbett from the Diz and my Dory podcast, like, about how he felt about it as well, and to put it kind of plainly, it was fucking. There's no direction. The only signing we made is a first choice goalkeeper. We've got a coach that's a technical director. I don't know what the fuck's going on. So in that sense, Alan, as John mentioned, as soon as we got on that unbelievable run, which from a link, I think it was yourself that sent me, Alan, I think there was a point that we were the most informed team in Europe, like sort of next to Inter Milan, probably the only time that we'll ever see our name next to Inter. But, when we got to like when we drastically came back down to earth, in the game against the Rangers, where we got gubbed 5-0 at Ibrox, do you still felt that this team is a kind of like a different to the vast majority of squads and the players and the coaches we've seen throughout the last few years, considering we had quite a good tenure under Robbie Nielsen, but just in terms of how we're playing and that kind of fan player connection as well, it seemed a bit kind of different and a bit more sort of closer to the squad, if that makes sense to you, or?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we spoke about it when Naisy got the job, about his sort of relationship with the players. Obviously, having been in and around the club already and having worked with the B team, they were kind of expecting that to be a bit of a springboard for young players, which is proven to be. Um, I think it's the thing about Naismith that impresses me a lot, and this is kind of like going into sort of my thoughts on him for the season.
Mm.
It is that mentality, and it is that kind of vibe of we don't know when we're beat, we don't know how to give up, basically, unless we're getting absolutely horsed by Rangers. But things to work on and all that. But yeah, the thing that impressed me the most about that sort of run that we went on, and we're kind of skipping past the dodgy start to the campaign, which I think can be sort of attributed to like the European competition and the squad just not quite being full enough for us to manage that. I think that's the thing, and I think that coupled with the sort of managerial uncertainties, like what John was talking about, and the way that was put out in the media as well, didn't really paint Hearts in the greatest of lights in terms of an organisation off the pitch, because there just didn't seem to be any. And then you had the fans with that banner. I remember talking about, what was it, funded by fans, ran by whatever it was,
Clowns or something like that.
better. Yeah, something like that. And at the time, when that was put out there, it was one of those situations where I thought that's a bit drastic, but I can understand why that's being said, and I can understand the fan unrest to a point. But we've we've been guilty of it as well this season. We've made episodes about him, Nazy, being on borrowed time, and then the pressure really being on him, and it just shows you the level of expectation and the level of pressure that comes with being at a club like Hearts. And I think Naismith has known that from day one, because he's never shied away from that. He's never said, "Oh, it's too big a job" or whatever. Like when he was offered the job, he's taken it because he feels he could do it, and he feels that there's things there that he can work with, and that's a huge thing. And like we said it on last year's review about the alternative managers that we could have went and got. And I just feel like Naismith was the safest and best option to go for at that point. And so it's proven to be. Obviously, there were rocky periods, of course, because every club in football has a rocky spell of a season. There's no doubt of that. You can't be perfect unless you're funded by a country. Not bitter about that. that's my Arsenal hat on there for a minute.
About 3 or 4 years,
John
Alan.
knows,
What do I keep saying? Give it 3 or 4 years.
John knows all about that, but that's not why we're here. Not better. At least ours is gold anyway. But no, I feel with Hearts we're certainly going in the right direction, and I think Naismith is a huge element of that. And I think even the connection with, like you spoke there about the connection between the fans and the manager, like obviously Naismith played for Hearts, and when he was at Hearts, he was a very good player for us. Certainly somebody that came in at the right time and contributed a lot and did very well, and showed very early on that the leadership was there. And he spoke not too long ago about like managers he's worked under and what he's learned from them. So you sort of go, he's worked with some good managers that he will have learned a lot from, and he will have kind of put that into his own management style, which you can see. But it's the biggest thing for me, and the sort of most positive thing that I really enjoy, and I think it adds to that connection with the fan base, is the young players. We saw Aidan Denham, the perfect example. Now, I don't think Aidan Denham is a brilliant football player. I don't think he's going to be at Hearts for the next 5, 6, 7 years. But this is a young lad that was told, "You're not good enough. You're gone." Naismith comes in and goes, "Actually, I want to keep you." Gets him a new contract, and now he's in the first team, and he played in Europe this season for Hearts, which is great for him. Being, a boyhood Hearts fan, he's living the fans' dream of playing for the football club, which is amazing. Do I think he's going to be leading our midfield for years to come? Probably not, but he's a perfectly serviceable option in the meantime. And then obviously as the season went on, we saw Macaulay Tate come through, and he's somebody I'm very, very excited about. Certainly, again, I'm not going to say he's going to lead the midfield for us for years to come, but there's definitely a player in there that can grow and develop. And I think with somebody like Steven Naismith, who knows him well from the B team setup, that's the perfect environment. And then you've got James Wilson, the young striker, coming through as well. So it all adds to that sort of connection between fans and manager and team. And I think there's clubs in Scottish football right now that don't have that. And I think that's what kind of sets us apart from them. Like, I look at Aberdeen, they've been hiring and firing managers freely for the last few years, and they just can't seem to get it right. And our neighbours across the city are exactly the same. A club with absolutely no identity, which is pleasing. But yeah, we just seem to be in a very, very good place with Steven Naismith at the helm. And I think after the first few months of the season, to be able to sit here and say that is positive, because there were some fans that were saying he should be sacked when we weren't doing very well at the start of the season.
Absolutely right, Alan. And just before we kind of go into our own personal highlights of the season, because I thought about this before we came on. So with this being Naismith's first big job in terms of a head coach, being the rookie coach, like throughout this time, like essentially, do you think what he's achieved is actually being a bit understated, in the sense, like, he's gotten third, 68 points, guaranteed European group stage football, 2 semi-finals, beat Celtic twice this season, obviously once at Celtic Park as well. The players that he's brought in, the players he's already brought in for next year as well, whereas we'll obviously touch on them as we go along. But do you think it's not actually overstated as to how well Naismith has actually done, John?
I mean, as someone who as I mentioned at the very top of the show, as someone who was a cheerleader for Naismith becoming manager, I certainly think so. I fully expected that he would carry the right mentality to manage this team. I think you touched on like the team spirit and especially the relationship with the fans earlier, but I think that the relationship between the players themselves is quite visibly improved this year. They seem like a very cohesive group. It was something that they talked about extensively in pre-season ahead of the season coming along, that they wanted to work hard on like their teamwork and the cohesion aspect, which was something that obviously was missing toward the back end of last season for various reasons. But yeah, I think that Naismith's achievements are understated. He's beaten a couple of particularly historic marks, finishing better off than that 97-98 team. Came very close to equaling the 2005-06 team. If a couple of results had gone our way, that could have even happened, to reach 2 semi-finals in his first season as coach is I think an extraordinary achievement that not very many Scottish managers can claim. It harks back to Robbie Nielsen's first season actually in charge for me back in 2014-15 when he first came in as manager. A lot of people were unhappy with the way Gary Lock was treated, perhaps fair. Some people just didn't buy Robbie as coach, and even after he had won the championship and had finished third the following year and was second in the league when he left for MK Dons, there were some people who just were never happy with Robbie Nielsen, but that was another story altogether. People at the time he was hired were kind of, Rangers and Hibs are in the championship as well. It's going to be a tough league. And then we won it by 21 points, an absolute canter. And then sort of the attitude switched from there to, well, that's what we should have done. There was never a particularly balanced view on that, and I think that the same is the case with Naismith. I don't doubt that if we have a rough patch to start next season with Europe as a factor, people will start bringing out the pitchforks again pretty fast, because that's what happens when you're a Hearts fan. It's a very demanding atmosphere, and we are a rather large club. We're probably the third biggest club in Scotland now, I think. I think my microphone is too loud.
Oh, no, man, it's all good. That's fine.
Hello? Is that better?
Perfect.
Excellent.
Carry on,
all
sir.
Right. So, I think Naismith's achievements have been understated for sure. He's gotten us into group stage European football again, which is it's just the third season in a row now that we've been in Europe, which has only happened like once previously in the last 40 years or something like that. It's crazy. You know, and I think chief among his accomplishments is the team chemistry that we now have, that we see. Crucially, Benny Beningame, when he re-signed, one of the first things he said was Steven Naismith is very hard to say no to. Like, people want to play for Steven Naismith. Alan, you and I, football manager guys, we dream of people signing contracts for that reason. In football manager, it is so hard to get people to actually want to play for you. And he has achieved that with one of the finest midfielders we've had in years. Hopefully, he'll have that effect on another certain Mr. Lawrence Shankland down the road, but we'll see how that pans out. But yeah, to see players who want to play for the manager, who want to play for the fans, and want to play for each other, that is chief among his achievements, and it's something that's easy to ignore, but it's very, very important to run in a successful football club.
Absolutely, John. And in that same regard as well, in terms of how well we all think he's actually done, we can move into the season highlights now. What I would like is one highlight from each of you out of the many we've had so far, that you thought was just amazing, and I would like to say mine as being like when Shankland actually signed his extension, but obviously that's not came yet. But in terms of a highlight, if you don't mind me starting this one, and it's a bit of a typical one, but it was just in the circumstances of how it happened, how not great a game it actually was, but just to watch it and see it happening, and the goal that was scored as well was just amazing. I think my highlight of the season was probably the Easter Road, the derby, where Shankland scored that absolute peach, in the dying embers of the game. When we see Shankland score a goal against most teams in the league, he's not that arsed. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he won't celebrate, or he won't give it too much celebrations. But you can see how much that goal meant to him personally, and the shithousery of the fans as well. It just tore the roof off, of the stadium as well. And to obviously do it, like against that filthy mob as well, which is absolutely amazing. It was just a feeling that you actually got, and then it was trending like in all these random football groups as well, like on Twitter as well. It just circulated everywhere. So genuinely, that for me was my highlight of the season. Alan, would you like to give us yours?
Yeah, I'm going to go for a bit of an odd one. Well, there's a couple, but I'll go for a bit of an odd one, which is actually a defeat, which is kind of strange to start on that. But the 2-1 loss against Aberdeen in December, there was a lot of negativity building up to that point. A lot of people were saying, oh, this game's huge. This game's massive for Hearts. They need to get a result. Massive for Naismith as well. And obviously, we didn't manage to get that result. We lost 2-1, and we deserved to lose that game. We weren't good enough. But the reason it's a highlight for me is that was the turning point for me, that you could see the team were hurting. And I think Naismith, or Shankland, sort of did an interview fairly recently where he was talking about being in the dressing room that day and just going mental, and it's obviously the captain's duty. That's what he has to do, has to call out players if needs be. And obviously a lot of home truths were needed on that day. So I think, to me, it's a highlight because I look at that game and I go, that's where the mentality of this team has come from. That's that sort of losing this game is not acceptable. Like that's not good enough. And it just shows that the quality of the players in the squad. And I think a huge part of it as well, for me, it's the experience within that dressing room that we have. And obviously we'll touch on it when we're doing a squad review and stuff. But for the players to react in the way that they did, and then that kick-started the run of, I think it was, Joe mentioned it earlier, it was about 12 games without defeat, where we were going to places that we've struggled before and winning. Okay, it wasn't comfortable. They weren't convincing wins, every single one of them, but we were winning. And it is that sort of grinding it out and that ability to just go, no, do you know what? We are the third best team in this country. Doesn't matter where we're playing. And I think something we haven't even touched on yet is the away record that we've had this season, of wins. It's been night and day, and so many aspects of this season in terms of improvements have come because of that. Like the away form's been unbelievable. Our ability to defend set pieces now just seems to be so much better than it has been in previous seasons. There just seems to be a lot more organisation, and I think a lot of that can be traced back to that game against Aberdeen, where obviously the dressing room after it was not a very nice place to be.
Good choice, Alan. Good choice, sir. And
Yeah.
John, what was your highlight for yourself, sir?
Yeah, before I do my highlight, I'm very quickly going to touch on both of yours. Ewan, I think that's a great one, the one at Easter Road, because it was it's the it's the perfect last minute winner in a derby. It was total hoofball. It was like Levine was in charge again, and we had Kevin McKenna up front as an emergency striker. That is the kind of game that you need to win if you want to have a successful campaign. Like a team like Celtic will tell you, champions know how to win ugly. And if you want to start to make a dent in the old firm's dominance, these are the kind of games you have to be winning. Games that are away from home, that you don't play particularly well in, you manage to pull it out in the last moments. And Alan, you mentioned the Aberdeen game, and I've mentioned already the importance of the team cohesion and the teamwork aspect of it. And I feel like the Aberdeen game was the night when Shankland properly succeeded Craig Gordon as captain. You know, like he put his stamp on the team and said, right, this is not acceptable and we need to do better. He's got these expectations. And in fairness to Shankland, at that point, he himself went on an absolutely insane scoring run. Like that was the period that basically took him to 30 goals. And so I feel like that was a very crucial turning point. For me, my personal highlight in the game that really convinced me that we were going to end up keeping third was the game at Tynecastle in January against Dundee, where it was utterly miserable weather. I was at the game. Fortunately, my girlfriend was driving because the trains were all off. We were 2-0 down at half time, and I was fucking livid. I was so raging that I had come all the way through in the rain, basically in a storm, to watch that. And Hearts brought it back in 1-3-2. It could have been 4-2. I think Forrest put the ball in the back of the net really late on, but was adjudged to have been offside, which, to be fair, I think he was. But that was the highlight for me, was the game that really convinced me, yeah, this is going to be different from last year, because we had a far steadier spring this year than we did last year. And I think that is ultimately the highlight. Like, we didn't blow it. We didn't piss it away this time. We actually had by Heart standards, we had a pretty decent post split this year, which isn't to say that it was massively successful, but we tend to be abysmal after the split. But yeah, the Dundee 3-2 at home, and then obviously we did the same in Dundee just a couple of weeks later. We beat them 3-2 away after they were up. I think they were up 2-1 at one point. Yeah, so yeah, the Dundee game.
Yeah, like, you know, that away game, like, to Dundee, Shankland, fucking massive shithousery as well. Fucking love it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Nice one, boys.
It's mental that none of us.
Sorry.
It's mental that none of us said the pie throw. The goal in the Easter Road derby was brilliant.
Mental, like
catching the pie, taking a bite, and firing it back was just perfect.
That was on my list, to be fair. That was on my list. That and the Rosenborg game, but the Rosenborg game obviously just feels like it was forever ago. The game at Tynecastle.
His Instagram post about it was the best part.
So true.
Marvelous. So thank you very much for that, boys, for your highlights. Now we're going to move on to next season in terms of, like, you know, what we're thinking squad wise, in terms of, like, you know, what we think specifically has to be improved. You know, are there any players that we particularly want to shift, want to keep, etc., who were maybe, like, you know, excited for in terms of prospects, etc. So I'm going to start with you, Alan, for this one, because obviously we've touched a wee bit on it in terms of the signings that we've all already made in Yandanda, Spittle, and also Penrice as well. Personally, I think 3 brilliant pre-contract signings. I think quite smart signings as well, in terms of, like, you know, these players knowing the league itself, and the kind of bolstering that front line in Spittle and Madanda, and, like, you know, especially Penrice as well, like, you know, for being such a young left back as well, you know, good solid season for him for when he was playing with Livingston as well. So it'll be quite interesting to see what he can do. So obviously we've already talked about the right back situation as well in terms of that being a key part we think for the summer recruitment, but just in terms of the overall squad as well, and with the group stage football coming up as well, do you think we need to have a heavy sort of signing spree, as it were, as we get into the summer, or do you think with the overall influence that the youth has brought with the squad as well, do you think we need to go sort of heavy-handed with cash in terms of bringing players in, or do you feel it might be a case of kind of seeing as we go along? Because obviously, we need to take into account the whole Shankland situation as well, in terms of he may go into the summer. So I would like to think that the board have a plan B in terms of who we bring in to to replace Shankland, even though he is replaceable, but to kind of have that kind of target man as it were. So just in terms of your overall thoughts, where do you think, or if you do, need to improve in terms of the overall squad for next season?
I think just sort of touching on the pre-contracts, I think the biggest sort of positive about them, like you said, is they have that experience of the league. And in particularly Spittle and Danda's cases, they've been standout players for their clubs for a good little while. So it's not as if they're, coming in cold sort of thing. Spittle's been at a few clubs in Scotland and done very, very well in most of them. He's always one of those players that whenever he's played against us and I've been at a game, I've kind of thought, yeah, this guy needs to be watched. He's got something about him. But he's got that experience. He's, I think, 27, 28 now. So, he's been around the block in this league and knows what to do. Danda is one that I'm very excited about. I think he's a player that we've been crying out for, that kind of player. But it'll be interesting to see what their roles are in the team and kind of where they come into it in that regard. Penrice is one that I don't really know how to feel about him, because we obviously got the pre-contract done in January, but I haven't seen much of him playing because I think he had quite a bad injury in the second half of the season. If I'm remembering correctly, he's not been involved for Livingston for a little while, so the opportunities to kind of see what he's got have been limited. But it's nice to see us going for players domestically. I think that's something that we've kind of not lacked for a while, but I think there's a lot of kind of elements of people kind of look down on Scottish football a little bit, because players, they leave and they go down south to England and they end up in like League One, League Two, or even lower, because that's where their levels match up with. One that I'll speak about is obviously a right back that I think every Hearts fan that I spoke to seemed to want us to sign, and it was Ryan Strain from St Mirren. He's since moved down south, and I can't remember where he's gone, and it's completely gone out of my head, but it's a lower level. And you kind of look at that and you go, these players shouldn't need to go further down the English pyramid. They should be able to be snapped up by a Hearts and say, right, you know what, maybe you're not Celtic or Rangers quality, but you're good enough to come and play for Hearts, and you're good enough to do something for us. And people might say, oh, you're hoovering up the talent from the lesser clubs in the league, but Celtic and Rangers did that for years and it worked out all right for them. So there's an element of that for me. I don't want to go too much into the Shankland situation because we could be here for a fortnight talking about it. But the one thing I will say about it is that I hope, like we saw in January, again with the contract negotiations, it was very widely put out that there was a time frame put on that, and it was, right, this is the contract offer for you. It's here until this date. If it's not signed, we go away and we come back and talk about it later. I hope in the summer, obviously it's maybe impacted with them being at the Euros and such, but I hope that there's that element again for the Shankland situation. I hope it's a case of, right, look, we'll give you this amount of time, but if nothing happens, you come back for pre-season and we crack on. Because you don't want distractions and things like that, particularly for your captain, your top goal scorer, and one of the best players that this generation of Hearts fan has seen for a very long time in terms of just his consistency and his quality. So I hope the club, like you say, I hope they do have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D, because I think they might need them in that sense. But overall, just before I kind of give you it back, I don't think the squad needs a lot of surgery, to be honest. I think there's probably some players in that Hearts team right now that are looking at it and going, I've not played as much as I'd like to. You know, I'm pointing at players like Toby Sibic, for example, somebody that I really, really rate, as everybody that listens to this knows my views on Toby Sibic. But he's a lad that might be going, do you know what? I could go back down to England and play in League One or the Championship and earn a decent wage, you know, and get more minutes maybe. Whether he's got the quality for that, I don't know. But, you know, we'll wait and see on that. But there might be a couple of players like that. And you put George Grant into that conversation as well, as much as he's been a very much improved player for me this season. A shoe-in for one of the awards that we'll talk about later for me. But he was told at the start of the season that his game time would be limited as well. And that if there was an opportunity for him to go elsewhere, he could. The club would entertain that. But that didn't happen, and he stuck around, and he's I think he's moved his family up here now, so maybe that's had a bit more of a settling effect on him. But you know, he might also be looking at it going, hang on, they're bringing in players in my position, where does that leave me? You know, it could be that. And I know obviously we have European football, and like I've said, you need a bigger squad for that, but you've still got to balance that with happiness and the, like John was talking about earlier on, the sort of team cohesion. You know, you don't want players sat on the bench for 70% of the season, getting the odd, you know, appearance off the bench here and there, or the odd start in a cup tie or whatever. Every single player in that team has to be competitive with each other. And I think that's something that we're building. But no, in terms of like recruitment for the season or for the summer, I'd love for us to go out and sign players of a Frankie Kent mold. You know, don't get me wrong, I love a project player. I love a wee, you know, unknown quantity coming in and going, who's this wee nippy winger from Costa Rica? Who's this Japanese winger? Who's this striker from Japan? Like, I've never heard of these guys before. Because there's that sort of exciting unknown quantity of what's this guy going to do? You know, and Kenny Vargas is, you know, example, 9 goals in a season for his first season in Scottish football is pretty impressive. So there's an element of, you know, enjoying a project player, but the other side of that, a Frankie Kent type who comes in, a no nonsense centre back. I'm not saying we need a centre back because I don't think we do. I think it's one of the positions we're actually quite set in, to be honest. But you look at the profile of Frankie Kent, you know, that sort of experienced English guy, been in the lower levels of English football, worked his way up, and now he's at Hearts. And you go, do you know what? The difference that he made coming into that defensive line, it's impressive. And I think, you know, you look at Spittles and Dan does and sort of say they're a similar age profile. Well, certainly Spittle is. I think Dan does a little bit younger. But you can clearly see that Naismith is looking for that level of player and that sort of experience to come in and help the players that we've already got, because it is a young squad. Naismith spoke about it a lot towards the end of the season about the promise and the youth within the group. And I think I didn't get a chance to do the sums, but I think we do have the youngest squad in the league in terms of average age. So it's clear that Naismith wants to nurture them, and bringing players in like a Frankie Kent, like a Jan Danda, like a Blair Spittle is an opportunity for these guys to say to, you know, I'm looking at a Blair Spittle and saying, right, you keep Macaulay Tate right, you keep Aidan Denham right, you show them what to do. And that, you know, that bleeds into itself in the whole player development thing.
Yeah, absolutely good points there, man. Just in terms of what you think, John, like in terms of like, you know, like the overall like kind of like, you know, squad in terms of experience and youth and ins and outs, etc. Do you think that we need to add much in terms of going into next season?
My view on the squad's composition for next season is very similar to Alan's. I don't think we need to make a lot of major change. I think it's probable that a couple guys will move on. But when I look at the squad a year ago, ahead of this this season, there were so many key players that were out injured. You had Boyce was back for about 6 weeks or something like that in the summer, and then was back out again for most of the season. Mackay was in and out, mostly out for most of the year. Halkett was out for the vast majority of the year. Gordon missed the first half of the season, and there were several other injuries over the course of the year. Haring was virtually unheard of this year because of his concussion issues and his knee problems. And Barry Mackay, toward the end of the season, again was just coming back. These guys are like new signings to Hearts if we can get them all in fit. And I think that when it comes to the striker situation, I think what we do in the event of a worst case scenario, which I don't want to think about, but if Shanklin goes, a lot depends on Boyce. If is Boyce going to be fit enough to deputise? Is he not going to be fit enough? In that case, I'm probably wanting to bring in a decent striker. You're not going to find another Lawrence Shankland. Alan, you said you mentioned him being this generation's, one of the best players of this generation at Heart for Hearts fans. I think Lawrence Shankland is well on his way to becoming one of the most prolific and iconic strikers in Heart of Midlothian history, particularly in this modern age, to be able to do the things he's doing. 30 plus goals and all the rest of the work that he does, I would be looking to spend the vast majority of the money that we spend trying to get him to sign an extension. Obviously, there's got to be a balance there, and there will be a point where we'll just be like, well, we can't afford it. We can't compete with bigger clubs, and you can move on with a blessing. But we should be doing absolutely everything we can to lock him in. If we've kept Benny, and we can manage to keep Shankland, and we can manage to keep Kent long term, and we can manage to develop a lot of these young players into the potential that they have, we could be a massive force for years to come. I think right back could be solved by Lewis Nielsen. I think he's been very impressive out on loan this year. I think he should be given an opportunity to make the starting right back job his. I can see Nathaniel Atkinson sticking around as a serviceable deputy to him at right back. Toby Sibbick can be used at right back. Toby Sibbick almost is like an Egert Jonsson type, where he can play basically anywhere in the back line. You could probably play him in defensive midfield or central midfield if you wanted to as well. He's quite a versatile player. He's not going to start every week, but he offers us a lot of depth, along the same lines as George Grant, who I should probably publicly admit I was completely wrong about, because I have eviscerated George Grant both on the podcast last year and in many conversations privately with Alan. So I apologise, George. He's been a totally different player this year, and he offers us so much depth. Where I feel people might move on is, I could see potentially, if we get a good bid for Cochrane, I could see him moving on, because we've got Kingsley who can play left back. We've got Penrice coming in, and I feel like maybe Cochrane might want to take that next step up at this point. He's a very talented player. He's going to hit a certain age very soon where he's going to want that big payday. So I think sell high if you get an opportunity. I can see either of Oda or Tagawa leaving, because with the additions of Spittle and Danda, we have a lot of competition for those front three positions in behind the striker. You've got guys like Mackay, Forrest, Danda, Spittle, Oda and Tagawa. Like, I can see either of those two getting moved on this year, because we do have to sell some players and make profit. It's the business side of football. But in terms of like signings that we need to make, I don't think that we need to make too many, because I think that Naismith and the recruitment department have been very intelligent with the signings they've already made. Penrice, Spittle, Danda, for the very reasons that you guys have outlined. Very good signings. We might need a new right back, but I would certainly, in the first instance, give Lewis Nielsen a chance to make that his. If we're really serious about developing young players, I think we need to give them that trust, that position of trust of, right, you're going to be first choice, and we're going to give you enough rope to hang yourself with in that role. I could see either of Tate or Denham going out on loan this year, with the other being given the opportunity to compete for places. But yeah, I certainly think that Tate, Denham and young Wilson look like fantastic young players, and hopefully they'll grow into the potential that they certainly have, because they could be starters for us, or they could be starters for any club in the SPFL, or they could hopefully one day go down into the English Championship or some level along those lines and do a job. But for now, I think rely on the youth a bit more than this year. So bed in the players that we've already signed and take advantage of the depth that guys like Grant and Sibic offer us. And I think key among everything is try and keep Shankland. If he doesn't want to stay, I have to admit I would probably prefer to sell him this summer than to keep him and let him go on a free, because what I really don't want is a Suter situation where he potentially ends up inevitably signing for Rangers on a free contract. If we're going to sell him, I would rather he gets a good move to an ambitious club down south than he leaves for nothing and goes to Rangers, because the other team that we're supposedly trying to catch, and it was the same week, Suter, our best player, John Suter, goes to Rangers, and all of a sudden they're that much further ahead of us. I don't want to see that happen again. I also don't want to lose Shankland. I want to keep him, but I don't want to keep him for one more year and then let him go for nothing to a rival.
I think after this, we're going to have to do like a special Shankland's like sort of a special episode, because we could literally make a whole episode about this in terms of the situations. If he stays, if he goes, how much, let him go for free. So we'll keep that in mind. But thank you very much, boys, for all your thoughts for the summer recruitment.
He's a generational player at the end of the day. It's very difficult to do a show and not talk about Shankland, because he is by far our key player. We need to try and keep him, and if we can't keep him, we have to cash in and make a profit, and we can't let him go to a team that we would consider a rival for nothing. I just feel like that would be a horrific circumstance. Because if we end up having to lose him, I want money in that we can then use to try and replace him, which is not going to be easy. We can't replace him with a free transfer from somewhere. We would need to spend big and bring in a proper player. We can't do that unless we get the money for him.
No, exactly.
That's our logic.
I think I'll just kind of briefly just chime in with a little bit else that I forgot to mention before. I think the thing that I like with the pre-contracts and the signings that we've done already, and Naismith was talking about it as well, we're not going to break the bank for players this season because we don't have to. And if you're talking about the prize money that we bring in from Europe and, all that other, prize money for finishing third and all the rest of it in the cup semi-finals, etc., that's all there to be used. Be it behind the scenes. I think they're investing in the Orium. They're putting something else in there, which is obviously going to help the training and all that. They're going on a pre-season tour, or pre-season training camp to Tenerife, which is probably just an excuse to go and get bevied, to be quite honest with you. But I mean,
that was what it felt like last year.
Yeah, well, they ended up having
was it Marbella they went to last year? Yeah, it was Marbella, I think, last year, and they just seemed hungover half the time.
I ended up having a fight one of the matches and all, so it's all there. But no, like I say, the thing for me that I like is it seems to be very organized and well thought out and well planned out, and you can tell that everybody's involved in that. Like the fact, obviously, like I say, that there will be a transfer budget for players, because there will be, but we're not dipping into that and saying, right, yeah, we're going to go out and spend millions. Like, I was talking to someone the other day and they were like, oh, I'd just love Hearts to spend $1 million on a player so we can stop going on about Bezlija being our priciest asset and all the rest of it, our priciest acquisition. But it's intelligent business is what we have to do. And I think so far we've done that. I think the Lewis Nielsen shout is a good one as well. And from what I've read and heard about him when he was at Partick, he played a few games in defensive midfield as well. So that could be an option to look at as well, because one thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about players, not having an alternative to Benny for me is something that needs to be resolved as well. Obviously we've lost Haring, we've let him go. Godspeed. I'm only just over it. I know. Moment of silence, please. Moment of silence. But letting him go leaves a hole for that kind of role of a player, and I don't think Denham or Tate are that way inclined. I don't think Devlin is able to do all of it. He can do some of it, but not all of it. Haven't even mentioned Cammy Devlin in this episode, which is bizarre. But we'll talk about him because, again, he might be one of my award winners, maybe. But yeah, it's intelligence, the intelligent business and being organized and having a plan. And I think you can see that the club does have that, and they're not panicking, they're not rushing, they're not doing things unnecessarily. The whole Benny situation with the new contract and stuff, they had that contract on the table for him in January, and he didn't sign it at that point. He wanted time to go away and think about it, and that shows you the club are like, yeah, do you know what, you go away and think about it, you come back to us and we'll deal with it. The Shankland situation's the same. I'm not saying it's going to have the same outcome. I hope it does, but again, this is not going to come as a surprise, but I feel exactly the same way as John does about Shankland, and I won't go into every detail. But surprise, surprise, and shock horror, John and I agree on something else. It's letting him leave on a free is not, for me. It's not an option. I love him, I adore him, and if it means we had him for another 12 months, I'd be delighted. But there is that element of watching him walk away along the M8 to go and sign for Rangers, which would almost seem an inevitability if he was to run down that contract.
So, on that note, what am I going to do? So, obviously, we have a few sections left. We have the player awards of our own choice, and we have the predictions for next season as well. So, what am I going to do? We're going to break it down into 3 sections. So, I would like one player from each of yourselves that was your player of the year, not Shankland, involved in this chat. I'd like, where do you think we're going to finish for next season? And thirdly, will Naismith still be head coach by the end of next season? So, John, I would like to start off with you, sir, just off the top of your head.
Yeah.
Your player of the season, where do you think we're going to finish next season? And will Naismith still be in the hot seat by the end of season 24-25?
My player of the season, it's a difficult one this year because we've been so much more consistent than we were last year. It's very tempting to go with Xander Clark again, which was, I think, the consensus that Alan and I ended up on. It's very tempting to go with Frankie Kent, who's come in and almost been like a Berra figure, like when Berra came back initially in 2017-18, just commanding, wins everything. If there's a header to be won, he will win it. But for me, I think that the dynamism of Vargas just tips it for him for me. I think I don't know why, but I just feel like Kenny Vargas, especially signing him on that lengthy contract and bringing him in permanently, I know it's bold to say, but he gives me Rudy Scatchell vibes. All right, I'll just say it. I feel like he has the potential to become a Scatchell-esque figure at Heart Midlothian. So he is probably my Player of the Year award. Where will we finish next year? I think we're going to finish third again next year. I think we'll finish third. In terms of the cups, I feel like we need to get past the semi in at least one of them. We need to win the fucking League Cup already, man. Just get it won. Just get it won, lads. I don't care about the Scottish Cup at this point. I just want to win the League Cup once in my lifetime. But yeah, I think we'll finish third, and I certainly do think that Naismith will be manager come this time next year. Whether he will be around beyond that, who knows? He will eventually, I think, if he carries on in this trajectory that he's on at the moment, he will start to attract interest from elsewhere. And he's an ambitious guy. He's probably going to want to have a stab at managing down south. Whether he would want to go back to Glasgow as a coach, I don't know, but certainly he'll fancy a stab at the Championship or something of that nature. So yes, he will still be manager as long as we have our say, but I think he'll start to attract interest eventually.
Good one, John. Good one, John. Just before pass it on to yourself, Alan. So, in terms of a player award, you briefly mentioned him, John. I think I have to go with Frankie Kent. Literally just based on the consistency throughout the whole year. Like he's hardly ever had a bad game. Yeah, there have been spells in a match where, like, if he's let a player go and it's caused a goal. We've seen Hearts players throughout the years that have just been fucking hot shite all season round. But in terms of just being that commanding figure in the centre of that back line, in terms of aerial duels as well, the percentage rate of his of his balls won rate is just fucking ridiculous. And I don't like to admit, but I kind of agree with what you're saying about that kind of Christoph Berra comparison. I personally don't like that man, but I can see where you're coming from in that sense. So I think he is a player that we want to keep long term as well. Like again, like his first few games, he just brought that kind of presence like straight away.
Yep.
So for me personally, I would have to give it to Frankie Kent. In terms of predictions next season, I don't know. Like I know that that's quite a weird thing to say. I think we're going to get third, but there is obviously a but as well. Like because you have to take into account the European football as well. Like we obviously know how it went. Like to the latter stages with Nielsen as well. Obviously, I'm not saying that's going to happen with Naismith, but you know you'd like to think with teams like Aberdeen, Hibs, who have obviously had a horrible campaign, that they'll want to prove a point as well. Like and with Kilmarnock as well, I think they'll be strong contenders for like at least top six as well. I think like McInnes has turned their fortunes around drastically as well, and to get European football as well under their belt, I think is a fantastic achievement. I'm about 90% positive we're going to get third. However, there's just that little thought in the back of my mind that it could go like a pear shape very quickly. But yeah, I think for the majority we will get third place, and I do still think that Naismith will still be in the hot seat by next season as well. So, Alan, your final thoughts on your the ward and your predictions and Naismith's role next year.
So, player of the season for me, you've both said kind of two that were on my list. Frankie was slightly higher than Vargas though, but yeah, I'm probably, and I gave it to Xander Clark last season because of the impression he made when Gordon was out injured and how Clark just picked up the gloves and cracked on. But Clark doesn't get it for me this year because it's just been more of the same from last season. He's not, I mean, I'm not saying he's taking his game up a level or anything, he doesn't need to. He's just been consistently good for us and done very well. And obviously his clean sheet records and stuff is great. So I don't know if I can give him it this season, but I'll probably go for Frankie Kent, honestly. And I think as well, in order to fix our goal scoring situation, if a certain number 9 does leave, just stick Jan Dandal on corners and Frankie Kent, teach him how to head in the opposition box, and Frankie Kent might hit 30 next season from corners. Yeah, listen, Frankie Kent for me, the influence that man has had since coming into that team and that defence, it helps that there's been a consistency of selection. We've not had a lot of injuries in that area. And he's just carried himself well. You can see it, that he's got that experience, as I spoke about earlier. My prediction for this season, at the end of last season, was that we'd finish third by 5 points or more. So we've done that. I also said we'd get to a cup final, which we didn't manage to do, unfortunately. But I think the same is going to happen again. I think third place by at least 5 points. I know you say about Kilmarnock and Hibs and Aberdeen. I think Hibs and Aberdeen are two sides that are in transition again. They seem to be in a transition every year at the moment, which is helping us kind of pull further away from them if we manage things properly and take care of the basics properly, which we seem to be doing. Kilmarnock will be an interesting one. I think the issue that Kilmarnock will find, I know they've got European football, but I think the issue they might have is keeping some of those players that have got them there. Because the likes of Armstrong, that the winger, he's been attracting interest. The young lad Watson in midfield as well is very highly rated. So they might see some players leave, and then obviously McInnes will have to rebuild that. Plus, obviously, the European schedules and stuff might give them not the greatest of starts to the season, like what we saw. If your team's not fully prepared for it, it's difficult to do that. But yeah, I think we'll get third place. I think we are in the best position out of all the teams that are fighting for it, or should be fighting for it, to kind of try and make it our own, because we've done it for many years where we have a good season and then we don't manage to back that up with another good season. This needs to be that springboard now. We need to say, right, this is where we are, this is the standard, this is the level. We need to be consistently this good and then improve in areas you can improve in. Like I said earlier, the defensive situation from set pieces, we've improved massively. And I know I made a joke about Frankie Kent scoring 30 goals, but if we were better at attacking set pieces, we might get a few more points on the board. It's all, marginal gains and things, which can help you in these situations. Will Steven Naismith be in charge at Hearts this time next season? Absolutely. Until Barcelona probably sack another manager and come calling for him, maybe the year after that. But yeah, Naismith all the way. He's the man. He's the man to take us to the level we want to get to, and I'm very, very, very excited about where that level could be.
I hate to say I told you all, but I did.
Get to fuck it, John. Get to fuck.
You did.
You sound just like Alan, honestly, these days. It's ridiculous. I get enough from him already. Right, to end this year's season review on the Since I Was Young podcast, John has been kind enough to offer us a quick fire quiz, which I'm very interested to see. I don't think we've done a quick fire quiz that's like involving me. I think the only thing we've done this season in terms of a kind of a quiz was that fucking hideous title that I brought at the start of the season. What was it? The alternative scenarios or something like that. I can't even mind.
That needs to come back.
What was it again? It was something like we played in Morocco. We played in the USA, and then like fucking
alternative scenarios.
There's a scenario. I fucking something pish like that, like absolutely rotten. Right, John. Me and Alan.
No pressure, John. It's got to be better than that.
Aye. So let's hear it, man. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I've been on Alan about this for ages because I love a good quiz, right? So I'm going to be the quiz master. I've got several questions here, right? So we'll just see how it goes and see who gets the most right. It's not going to be one question each. It's just going to be first to answer. So the first question is, Lawrence Shankland scored in a 2-0 away win at St Johnstone on the opening day of the league season on 5th of August. When and against which club did he score his next league goal?
Fucking hell, you're talking about memory now. Fucking hell, John.
Right. These are meant to be quick fire. I'm going to be here for a fortnight.
Aye, fucking hell.
I'll give you a countdown from 5, right? So 5, 4.
Get off that phone.
2, 1. Time's up, guys.
I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna just go for I think it was a 0-0 draw anyway, but I think I'm gonna go for Kilmarnock at home when we drew.
So Lawrence Shankland's next league goal, now he scored in Europe, but he didn't score his next league goal until 22nd of October versus Celtic in the 4-1 loss at Tynecastle.
Really?
That puts into perspective how insane that run of form he had mid-season was.
Okay.
It was completely mental that he got to 31 goals.
I can tell straight away we're going to be rotten at this, but okay.
I'm tuned in now. My phone's away over there.
Here's one that at least one of you should get, right? Which Hearts youth prospect made his league debut for the club when he came on as a substitute replacing Cammy Devlin on 13th of August in that very home draw against Kilmarnock?
Macaulay Tate.
Macaulay Tate. Oh, we can share.
You're both incorrect. It was Aidan Denham.
Aidan Denham.
He had previously made one League Cup appearance in 2021-22.
Right,
next question.
Macaulay was later.
He was. That's correct. So 2 questions down. We're both 0 for 2. Question: How many?
Great were we?
Now this next one, I'm going to see who can get closest. Right? How many competitive appearances did Alex Lowry make for Hearts?
I'm gonna go for 11.
I'm gonna go for 14.
Alan is closest. He made 17 competitive appearances, encompassing 12 in the league, 2 in the Viaplay Cup, and 3 in the Europa Conference League. So at the moment, it's 1-0 Alan.
Alan fucking hated Lowry. That point shouldn't be allowed.
That's how I know I was counting down the minutes till he was away.
Yeah. The question was originally Ofaya, but he wasn't around long enough to.
I know what he was like 2-3 games or something like that.
Yeah. Something like that, yeah. I think it was 8 total, I think, something like that. What was Hearts' longest win streak of 2023-24?
12 games.
Again, we'll see who can get closest.
I'm going to go for 12.
You're saying 12, Ewan?
It
Alan?
wasn't 12. It was 12 unbeaten, but you're talking like wins rather than unbeaten.
Win streak.
I'm going to go for 6, was it? 6 or... No, 7. I'll go 7.
So again, Alan is closer. It was 8 from 2nd of January to 17th of February. So it's 2-0 Alan. It's all
So I've got to get these two right. So I've got to get these two right to actually at least draw. This is fucking shite. You two are conspiring like with all your football manager shite. Right? This is fucking rotten.
All right, next question. How many more points than the 1997-98 side did Hearts achieve in 2023-24? Who can get closest?
We get that season. Jesus, I looked this up the other day.
I'm gonna go for Alan's prediction in terms of how many points we are going to make third. I'm gonna go for 5.
Yeah, I would have probably said 4, so I don't know.
Well, Alan is once again closer because it was 1. We got 68 points this year compared to the 67 that Jim Jeffries' side got. However, Jeffries' side did play 2 fewer matches because it was in the old Premier Division. So it's 3-0 Alan. So you're going to have to get basically the next 3. Ewan, we're going to go a wee bit further back in time this time.
Want me to just mute myself?
How many Scottish Cups has former Hearts goalkeeper Steve Banks won?
In random.
See, I'm not going to answer this because John and I had a conversation about this before, and
that is true. Yeah.
You've asked me this question before, so I'm going to let Ewan answer because I know the answer.
So how many?
This was originally meant to be Ewan's question.
So how many Scottish Cups has Steve Banks won?
Yep.
Obviously, there was a 2006 one.
Correct.
And I know that he went to another Premier League club. Was it something like Dundee United or something like that? Or it was?
Yep, that's 2. Is it the 2 or has he won another?
I'm going to go for 3.
You're correct, Ewan. Yeah. 2006 with Hearts, 2010 with Dundee United, and 2014 was at Johnston. The unusual thing about it is that he was an unused sub all 3 times they won the Scottish Cup.
Just based on that question alone, that is worth 4 points at least, no?
I'm going to give you a point for it. Yeah.
I'll give you a free run at that question.
Okay, so 2 more questions. We'll see if you can get it back or if Alan can put it away. How many competitive goals did Mikael Pospisil score for Hearts? Who can get closest?
Loved Pospisil as well.
I'm going to go for his... I'm just going to go on a run. I'm going to go for his squad number, 21.
Pospisil. Did he score more than 21 goals, though? I don't know if he did. He was kind of in and out. He wasn't like a... I'm going to go for 14. I don't know why. I'm going 14.
Alan is correct. Mikael Pospisil scored a total of 14 competitive goals for Hearts, which means that Alan has confirmed the victory by 4 points to 1. Well done, Alan. Ewan, you'll have to brush up on your Hearts history, lad.
fucking seems like it, eh? That's fucking total facts. I'm not even buying this now, man. But no, John, thank you very much for actually taking the time to get those the question done for us, lads. We really appreciate it as always. And yes, I think this brings us to the end, officially of the Since I Was Young's podcast 23-24 season. As we said throughout all of this year, thank you to everyone that has got involved in terms of new subscribers, interactions as well. Honestly, guys, you've just been absolutely massive. Thank you very much. And obviously a big special thank you to you, John, as well. We always love having you on the podcast as well, mate. So thank you very much for joining us today. And obviously as well, guys, we would love to hear all your thoughts on everything that we talked about throughout our season review as well. And as always, if you wanted to subscribe to the podcast via our YouTube page, please do as well. And as I said, if you want to get involved on everything that we talked about, please, if you want to fire someone on our socials as well, please feel free to do so. So It's now off to the Euros as well, which I hope everybody enjoys as well, and I hope Scotland get as far as we possibly could. Just don't injure. I was injure our beloved striker and our beautiful goalkeepers as well. Not again, please, because we can't go through that. So yes, and we will see you all in the new season 24-25. And if you're going away on holiday as well throughout this summertime, we do hope you have a good one, and we will see you when we return to Scottish football. So from everybody and from Alan and John, we do hope you have a good one. You all take care. Bye for now.
Thanks, guys. Bye.